Hey, what's up guys? Today we're going to talk about the best supports in Genshin Impact that you have to use to make the game easier. These are going to be some really good support characters that can fit most team comps and that are definitely worth building and investing into and using basically whenever you can. They're all very powerful in their own way. I'm going to talk about it, talk about how to build them very briefly, and explain why they're so broken. This video is going to be split in two sections. We're going to start with a sort of top 5. It won't really be in a particular order, but it will be 5 amazing supports you can use in most teams. And then after that, we're going to have a bonus section of other very powerful supports in their respective roles. These might be some more unexpected characters that you might not know I'm going to talk about. A few of them are still kind of underrated, but very, very powerful. So I'm going to include them in a bonus section after the top 5 so that it can help everyone in this video. In case you already know, let's say the 5 best supports, I'll include some other ones that you should probably invest into if you can fit them in your teams. Lastly, I want to mention that more than half of the 5 characters that I talk about are 4 stars, and the other powerful supports we talk about after the top 5 are all 4-star characters. So this video should be able to help everyone invest into characters that are really powerful and that you should probably be using. Also, I want to clarify, and I'm recording this later, that my definition of support, because it is used in many different ways, is mainly a character you add in your team alongside your DPS. Now, there are quick swap teams, there are teams where the support characters are doing most of the damage, but just to keep things simple, these are just supports that are good to build generally, that can fit many different team comps, and that often have a very significant role without being like the main damage dealer of the team. So I will be evaluating characters mainly as supports, but I will be specifying my reasoning for every character in this list because they are all very strong characters that you should be building if you can. So that being said, I want you guys to know that I stream most nights on Twitch. Be sure to sub if you're new, and let's get right into it. The first character I want to talk about in the 5 best supports that you should be using is Sucrose. This might be the more surprising one of the 5, and in my opinion, she does barely narrow it out over a lot of other really strong supports that we will talk about later. But the reason for that is because she's basically your free-to-play Venti. If you guys don't know, Sucrose is amazing at clumping enemies, right? She's an Anemo character with a powerful burst and skill, great for clumping enemies and proccing the Verdescent Venerer set, one of the strongest support sets in the game, decreasing elemental resistance of opponents and giving you more damage. And so she acts similarly to Venti, but she can also be better than Venti in certain situations. For example, for teams that want this elemental mastery bonus that she can give your whole team with her talents, and also the attack percent that she can give your carries with Thrilling Tales. For example, in a Shangling team, buffing your Shangling so much is actually really good. Same with like Shoutout teams, where you might actually want to pick Sucrose over her alternative, which is Venti. And the fact that she's 4-star is a huge advantage because not everyone has Venti. He's a limited time 5-star. 5 stars can be expensive and not worth the Primo Gems. So having a character like Sucrose is amazing. Furthermore, she got buffed a huge amount in patch 1.6. She's even stronger as a support or a carry now. You can stack Elemental Mastery on her, transfer it all to your team, but also deal a lot of swirl damage. Because as I mentioned in my last video, swirl did get huge buffs in patch 1.6. So Sucrose just basically got better. Her swirls will deal more damage. You can invest into her and her burst if you want to. And just by building Elemental Mastery, you'll get that damage and the EM for your whole team, making her an amazing 4-star. The next character I want to talk about is Xingqiu. This marks the beginning of the 4 supports that I think are just the best, like in a tier of their own, and Xingqiu is so strong because he does so much really, really well. His elemental burst, proccing the rain swords around you, especially with constellations, will deal an insane amount of damage. And that is sort of a bonus from its main purpose, which can oftentimes be just enabling other characters to proc reactions. In my opinion, a lot of pyro characters wouldn't be nearly as strong if Xingqiu didn't exist. All the main pyro carries like Diluc and Hu Tao like running Xingqiu with them so that they can constantly proc Vaporize on every hit and just multiply their damage by 1.5 with the reverse Vaporize reaction, which is oftentimes the best in every team comp. One of the reasons I even think Child is so strong as an enabler is because he can act as a second Xingqiu. He is literally a must play with certain pyro carries, so I definitely think you should invest into him if you have him. And on top of that, even without pyro units, he's just a very strong off-field support. So much so that Razor teams, Kaching teams, and just teams that don't even run reactions will run a Xingqiu in it just because of how much damage he deals. He's a solid off-field burst support who offers everything you want in a character. Lastly, if you run him with a sacrificial sword, even at refinement 1, it significantly decreases the amount of energy recharge you need. Anywhere from 180 to 200 is more than enough, and then you can focus on building his damage, and so you don't have to stack too much ER on him. Lastly, all of his constellations are pretty insane, and he's a character who scales very well with investment, so talent levels and artifact sets, and so investing into him is definitely a good idea. The next character is no surprise to anyone. He was kind of slept on for a little bit, like people knew he was broken and then stopped paying attention to him until the 1.6 buffs where people are hyping him up again, and that character is Venti. Venti is absolutely insane. He's always been pretty broken, especially against multiple enemies, because of how easy you can clump them. If the Abyss has a lot of enemies, a lot of non-heavy units you can clump up with Venti, Venti will literally just make the content super easy, and he honestly invalidates pieces of content like the Viridescent Venerer domain that I'll put on screen. You can just press Q on Venti, use a burst or two, and clear it in like 20 seconds. And so Venti is extremely powerful in his niche, right, against a lot of enemies, but his scalings are also so broken that he's good just in general. Honestly, I believe that Venti is so strong that even in situations where he shouldn't be good, so against heavy enemies or even against just 2 enemies, he does so much damage that he's still an insanely powerful support, even in situations where he wouldn't normally be good. His energy cost is pretty low because it's 60, but you get refunded 15 when you use it, and you can infuse your burst, make it swirl constantly, and apply the Viridescent Venerer set, which not only increases your damage, but also decreases the resistance of opponents. An amazing set for Venti. Venti is also one of the biggest winners from the 1.6 buff, much like Sucrose, because his swirl just does a ton of damage, so stacking Elemental Mastery on him is amazing, and as you guys can see, like, he actually hurts. You just use his burst, infuse it, and it swirls everyone constantly, dealing a ton of damage and clumping all the enemies. Not only does Venti scale extremely well with investment and with your level, because swirl is a transformative reaction, so leveling him up is very important, but even at low investment, he still clumps enemies and does his job quite well. For that reason, I think Venti is a must-play support if you have him. Next up, I want to talk about Zhongli. Zhongli is an amazingly powerful unit. After his buffs, he's just like a must-play if you have him. I noticed a lot of people get sick of seeing team comps with Zhongli, and to that I can say you can oftentimes replace him with a shielder like Diona, who we'll talk about later, but the reason why he's in so many teams is because he's just so powerful and so versatile. His shield alone makes him insane because it shreds the resistance of enemies, including to elements that you can't shred very easily like Anemo and Geo, and he even decreases the physical resistance of opponents, being able to replace Superconduct in some team comps. On top of that, his shield has an incredibly high scaling. It has a lot of HP, so you can basically tank a lot of enemies with ease. For example, Abyss 12-2, the second half with a lot of those Oceanid creatures attacking you, can be very, very annoying if you don't have a shield, which is why a character like Zhongli is so insanely powerful there. So he increases your damage and makes you tankier, can even replace a healer, and so his utility is amazing. On top of that, if you do invest into him and give him damage, his burst can hit for quite a lot. What's nice about this character is that there are actually 2 ways to build him. You can run him relatively low investment with HP on everything and just stack his shield, give him a set like Millilith, and literally just have an insanely powerful shield that also buffs your characters. On the other hand, you can even make him a burst support if you want to, giving him as much burst damage as he can, and that paired with HP on your sands will give you a strong shield and also heavy burst damage, with many different sets being viable, like Noblesse, like 2-piece Petra, like 4-piece Millilith. There's so many good options for him, and he's a character who, in my opinion, can basically just never be bad. Because of that, I think Zhongli is a must play in most teams if you do have him, and definitely a character you should be using. The last character in the 5 most important supports that I want to talk about is a character who I've been praising excessively for a long time now. I believe since October, since before people knew how broken this character was, I was praising Bennett for being amazing, and he truly is. I'm going to try to keep this section brief because you guys have heard me talk about Bennett in so many videos now, but he truly is an insanely broken character, amazing in like every role and at everything he does. If you don't know why Bennett's so good, his elemental burst gives you like everything you want from a support character. First of all, as a bonus, it has an insanely high scaling for like no reason, and then on top of that, it'll heal you. So Bennett is a great healer, right? It just heals you consistently, and at the same time, it gives attack percent to your on-field character, being a huge buff to just whatever DPS you're using. This attack bonus ratio is absolutely massive, especially when you pair it with the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige that Bennett can run. I tend to use Bennett in so many teams because he's oftentimes just the best healer. He might not heal the fastest, but it doesn't really matter because he heals enough, and at the same time, he does other things like give you a huge damage buff. On top of that, Bennett is a really good battery. Bennett's E has a very low cooldown in his burst, and so you can spam it, generate those pyro particles, and then swap to another character like Xiangling to give her burst back very fast without needing to run a lot of energy recharge on either character. So while I don't want to talk about Bennett for so long, you guys can see why I love him so much. He's an amazing healer and he amps your damage. In my opinion, he is one of, if not the strongest characters in Genshin because he's just so versatile and so powerful in basically any team. So those are the top 5 supports that you should be using if you have them. Any of the characters I mentioned are just like staples in a lot of comps. With that being said though, I want to move into other really strong 4-star supports I think you should also be building, and some of them don't get enough credit for how good they are. First up, I have to talk about Fischl. Fischl is an amazing electro character who enables a lot of other characters too. For example, she can be a great support when you need the electro reaction for like superconduct or electro charge. Her Oz is basically a mini DPS that she can summon, and then it'll still DPS while she's off field. It'll help your character and just deal a ton of damage. On top of Oz, her Ascension 4 passive is insane, and all of her constellations are also very, very strong. She gives you a ton of off-field damage, is an amazing support in many teams that don't mind having an electro support. What I mean by that is some reaction teams might not want Fischl because it might mess up the reaction, like say a freeze comp, but in any team where you can run her, she's very powerful and she enables specific comps. She's an amazing battery for characters like Beto because her Oz generates a ton of electro particles, enabling Beto to spam her burst without like needing too much energy recharge. That being said though, I believe one of the reasons why Beto is so powerful is because she has Fischl to be her battery. Also regarding Beto, I don't want to make a whole section on her because she's a character I consider usually more like a carry. She can be a great off-field support and can be played as a strong off-field support, but usually she ends up doing more damage than like your carry, so it's hard for me to label her as just a support. But yeah, Beto's amazing and is powered up by Fischl. They complete each other's weaknesses. Fischl's amazing in single target, Beto's great against 2 enemies or more, and Fischl is a battery of electro particles for your Beto, and they're both amazing supports. Next on the list, we need to talk about Diona. Diona is an extremely valuable character, especially for anyone that doesn't have Zhongli. She's very free-to-play friendly. She's a 4-star who was even given for free very recently in an event, so a lot of people should have her. And not only is her shield like insanely powerful for certain content like Current Abyss 12, allowing you to just tank damage without having to dodge everything, but she's also an amazing healer and provides a lot of utility. When you give her a sacrificial bow or a Favonius bow, she can generate a lot of particles for your whole team, making her a great battery, especially for other cryo characters like Eula. And on top of that, she has a lot of upsides. Her elemental burst is good healing, and her skill is a very powerful shield that is definitely your best bet if you don't have Zhongli. And even as someone who has Zhongli, I still use Diona a lot in like the other team because having a shield in Genshin Impact is really good and very comfy. Lastly, if you manage to have her C6, she will give you a ton of elemental mastery, which can be very nice in specific team comps. On top of that, her artifact sets are very good. You can give her something like Instructor for elemental mastery, or a more generalist set, and what I usually recommend, the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige, effectively giving your burst like this 20% attack to your whole party. Next up is a character who's been very underhyped since her release, someone I even talked about in my underrated video, who I believe is a very powerful 4-star support that can fit many team comps. That character is Rosaria. I really like Rosaria, and I've been trying to hype her up because she's very good at many different things. She's comparable to Kaya, who's also a very good support, but she can shine exceptionally well in specific teams that would choose her over Kaya, and they can also be used together in some quick swap teams. And the scaling on all of her abilities is actually quite high. Her elemental burst is very good. It does multiple hits, applies cryo at a decent rate, especially if you have Constellation 2, which increases its duration, allowing you to not only apply cryo more, but obviously deal more damage. On top of that, Rosaria can be a great cryo battery, especially paired with a Favonius Lance. Because you can spam your E, it generates 3 particles, and then you can catch it on like Eula, for example. On top of that, and the main reason I like Rosaria, honestly, is because of this passive. You can gain 15% crit rate from this if you just stack some crit rate on your Rosaria. So even if you neglect her crit damage a bit, or you don't perfectly like min-max her, you can still give 15% crit rate to your party members. This can be great for off-field supports, for snapshotting, or for like a hyper carry DPS like Shao. Gaining 15% crit rate is honestly pretty huge, and why I tend to pick Rosaria over some other options when I need a cryo character. On top of that, you can give her 2-piece Noblesse with 2-piece Blizzard Slayer for quite a lot of damage if you do invest into her. And overall, the reason I'm including her in this video is because I believe if you need a cryo support who gives you crit rate and who does a pretty significant amount of damage, Rosaria is very good. And she shines exceptionally well in quick swap teams, even paired with Kaya or paired with Xiangling, like a reverse melt quick swap team, which I've talked about a few times on this channel, which is a very powerful comp enabled by Rosaria. Lastly, the reason I'm not talking about Xiangling in this video is because, one, we've talked about her a bunch in other videos, but the main reason is because I consider her more of a DPS. Even if she is off field most of the time, her Pyronado paired with Xingqiu or paired with Child usually makes her the star of the team, and usually build your team around Xiangling as a DPS. But she can be a support with like Ganyu and stuff, and she can still be good. But I don't really feel comfortable putting her in like a best support video as much as I would putting her in a best DPS video. So I tried to include a lot of characters in this video so I could make a complete video of the best supports in Genshin Impact, the top 5 overall, and then a bunch of other good 4-star options. I also want to mention that I wanted to include Jean, but she is a 5-star, so it was kind of awkward, but she is really good. And so these are sort of the best supports for patch 1.6. I figured it'd be nice to make it now that you know, the changes have come out. Swirl is a lot better. Characters like Sucrose and Venti got pretty huge buffs. And I did a couple of polls asking what video you guys wanted to see. A lot of you asked for this video and for the best builds for every character, which I made a while ago, and a lot has changed since then. So that's probably what I'm going to be making in the near future. And also there's the new Abyss coming soon. The Abyss is rotating out. I believe there's going to be new monsters and new mechanics, so I'll be able to make a guide on that and helpful videos on that as soon as it drops and we figure it out. Anyways, I don't want to waste any more time. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you're new here, be sure to follow me on Twitch, all that stuff, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.